Well, I've invited my new friend Cynthia to come on up and share a little bit of her story of how this got personal for her. So, will you welcome Cynthia Mccloud up?
Good morning and happy Easter. My name is Cynthia Mccloud, and I'm here today with my husband and son and his family. And we're new to Santa Barbara, and we're very new to the Santa Barbara Community Church. Jim is retired and playing pickleball and serving as papa to our 8 grandchildren. And I teach leadership at USC in my spare time. I work as a life and career coach. As I was praying and reflecting about how to share my testimony with our new church family, I found the experience uncomfortable, as I'm not used to talking about my own journey. And so today, I'm practicing what I teach, which is to get comfortable being uncomfortable. I think of my journey to know Jesus in 3 different phases. The first phase started in childhood and continued on into high school. I grew up in a highly volatile home where my mother often flew into angry rages and took her anger out physically and on my younger sister and me. She controlled us both physically and emotionally with fear, and she spoke harshly about all church people and was against us having any contact with them. And yet, I saw amazing calm and peace and love in the families of friends who attended church. I was seeking something that I was sure others had. As a little girl, I often begged to go to church with my friends, and one day, my mother actually let me go to Sunday school, and I learned about Jesus that day. And I remember waiting after church on the steps, hoping my parents would remember to pick me up. I was the last one there, and I should have been afraid, but I didn't feel alone. I felt rather a sense of calm. And when I think back, I think that that was where my Christ journey began. And he was somewhat preparing the soil for the rest of my life. Fast forward into high school, and I attended many different churches and denominations, really still seeking something that seemed to be kind of just out of my control. I didn't find it by going to church, so I decided to take control and get married at 19. And I ended up even more lost and alone in another explosive and oppressive environment with yet another person controlling my every thought and move. Fear had become a constant companion. Through all of these experiences, I could never figure out what I possibly could have done to deserve so much pain. I had allowed myself to become a victim, and I learned that putting my trust in other people was dangerous. One night, in the middle of the night, I woke, and I felt what I thought was an angel sit down on the side of my bed. I felt such peace and calm again for just a moment. But by morning, I decided yet again that I needed to take control and make a change for my children, if not for myself. By the end of this first phase, fear was back in my life. I was a single mother, 2 babies, no job, no education, no choices, and no hope. As a result, I refer to this first phase in my life as the why me phase. A couple of years later, Jesus brought an amazing servant leader into our lives. Together, my new husband and I began a second phase in my journey toward Jesus. Jim took on an instant family, and he helped us learn about God. We found a church, and we put our 2 children into a Christian high school. At the same time, both Jim and I focused on our careers, still working to raise our family. We really did all of the things that we should have been doing. We taught Sunday school, we helped our children stay involved with youth group, and we went to church on Sundays. After our children left home, we then went on a journey with my career. We moved 7 times over the next 15 years for my work, and we got to live all over the country. We got to live in Paris, France for 3 years, and it was an amazing experience. And with each move, we found a new church to attend. Yet, I found myself still seeking, never understanding that God was continuing to reach out to me and invite me into a personal relationship with him. I was doing everything I knew to be in control and also to perform, never really understanding that Jesus was imploring me to stop trying to control and start trusting. And as a result, I think of this second phase in my life as the who me phase. By 2014, I was in my mid-50s, and I was at a crossroads. I wanted to change careers from business to academia, and I didn't really know how to make that happen. And I was still carrying a lot of my old fears: fear of trusting others, fear of being controlled, fear of the future, fear of everything. And I sat down one morning and I began what I think of as the third phase in my life toward Jesus. I opened my Bible and I began studying. And the story of Peter and James and John as fishermen before they became disciples comes to mind. They spent an entire night trying to catch fish, and it wasn't until Jesus actually stepped into their boats that they changed their lives. Luke 5:6 says, when fishermen did as Jesus told them, they caught so many fish that their nets began to break. And that touched me in a huge way. For the first time ever, I started praying and asked Jesus to step into my boat, and I let him take control. I began to trust that he had a plan for my future, and as it turned out, it actually also ended up being the desire of my heart. I received a confirming gift of peace and calm that I had sought really for a whole lifetime. I was able to let go of all my fears, or almost all of them, and let Jesus be in control. I no longer had to live in that fear. And from that day forward, amazing prayers were answered in our lives. We moved back to Orange County, where our son's family was growing, and all 4 of them are here this morning. I started work at USC in my dream job, and Jesus was opening my eyes to how I could live his purpose in life. Today, we're in this beautiful place in Santa Barbara and looking for ways to serve here at SBCC. We've already met some loving friends in our small groups, and I still journal and I still talk to Jesus daily. As I continue to grow, during this third phase in my life, it is no longer my voice asking the question. Now it's his saying, trust me. Thank you.
Good morning. Happy Easter. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lisa Schomer, and about 5 years ago, I moved from Chicago to California. They said I had about 5 minutes to explain about 50 years of God's faithfulness. So let's give it a shot. Ever since I was a little girl, I knew I was different, but not in the way I wanted to be. In fact, my nickname was the Bucktooth Beaver. Yep, that's right. Kids can be so cruel. Thankfully, my second grade teacher, Mrs. Suckup, called me a different name. She called me Jesus' Little Lamb. And because of her, my faith in Jesus was born. During college, I still had a faith, but was not walking with God. I dated a boy, we had fun together, we fell in love, and the normal transition seemed to be marriage. So during premarital counseling, my pastor, who knew me as a child, knew I was not seeking God and called me out on it. But I was so self-confident, I thought I could do marriage without involving God. Tragic error. So 30 years ago, I got married. We both had good jobs. I was employed by a mutual fund company, traveling the country, presenting investment seminars, and my husband was a cop and eventually working undercover. Life seemed pretty good. We had kids. I became a stay-at-home mom. The kids and I were attending church alone, and eventually my husband and I divorced, which drew me closer to God and my faith. 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 I did not know how much I would need my faith until about 18 years ago. In 2003, my ex, the father of my children, just months after the divorce, had a horrible snowmobile accident, leaving him a paraplegic. I had 2 small children. My son, Jake, was 7, and my daughter, Tara, was 5. I was a self-employed certified financial planner, but my business was just getting started, and I was barely making ends meet. I felt overwhelmed. So, seeking direction, I talked with my pastor asking, what should I do? What kind of Christian would I be if I would not take him back? He said, read James 1, 5 through 6 every night, pray, listen for God, and do nothing until you know the answer is from God. James 1, 5 through 6 reads, if you want to know what God wants you to do, ask him, and he will gladly tell you. For he is always ready to give bountiful supply of wisdom to all who ask him. He will not resent it. But when you ask him, be sure that you really expect him to tell you, for a doubtful mind will be unsettled as a wave of the sea that is tossed by the wind, and every decision you make will be uncertain as you first toss this way and then that way. If you don't ask in faith, don't expect God to give you any solid answer. Faith. Faith was all I needed. This verse was the start of me seeking God in decisions, waiting for him, listening for him. There were many nights of crying, praying, reading the Bible, journaling, and sometimes yelling at God. Yep, I'm that girl. I yell at God and admitting, God, I'm just tired. I'm just tired. Please help me. So after 6 months of reading James 1 and praying, I got my answer. My ex remarried. But life was not easy for a broke single mom. There was no McDonald's, definitely not a Happy Meal in sight. I remember one shopping trip in particular. It was at Target, and I saw my daughter over to the side, banging her head on the tile, screaming, I want gum. I knew that we could only afford the basics. I was so embarrassed. I scooped her up, pushed the cart to the side, and said, well, we're out of here. I left Target, loaded up the kids in the car, turned on the radio. As tears came down my face, I suddenly prayed, God, help me. Life shouldn't be this hard. It was then I heard Jake, my first grader, say, Mommy, are you all right? Don't worry, Mommy. God will meet all your needs. I was shocked. I turned around and I said, what did you say? Now, let me tell you a little bit. Jake's only 7 years old. He's in first grade. He responded again, Mommy, God will meet all your needs. Philippians 4:19. It's our memory verse of the week. It was like a direct message from God. I got you, Lisa. And he did. That year, I only made $10,000, but that plus my savings was enough to get by. God provided. My business grew. And then in 2005, God orchestrated a meeting with another financial advisor who was looking to retire and wanted me to take over her practice. There was a catch. There was a price tag. The price tag was all the equity I had in my home. Now, I know common sense would say, don't do it. Nope, too big of a risk. But I prayed, listened to God, and yes, I did take out the line of credit against my house. Sometimes God's going to ask us to do something that makes no sense at all, but we need to walk forward, do the hard work, and trust Him and have faith. Several years passed, and God rewarded me for listening and trusting to Him. I don't know how this happened. I mean, from going from a broke single mom, I was featured in Chicago Magazine as one of the best financial advisors in Chicago. This was not me, but all God. And just when I thought life was getting pretty easy, and we all have those times in our life where like everything seems pretty smooth sailing. Well, just about 6 years ago, out of the blue, I just finished a triathlon. Yes, I used to be that girl, not anymore. I can barely walk around here. The hills are so high. I just finished a triathlon in Chicago, and I started feeling electric shocks down my body, left side, and felt numbness. The doctors ran so many tests, and finally, after losing about 20 pounds, yes, I was probably about 25 pounds less than I am now, so yeah, pretty ugly. I have a friend over there who can verify how ugly it was. But they diagnosed me as Lyme disease. I was so scared. I didn't think on some days I would live to share my story. I don't know what was worse. Was it the disease or worrying about it? Well, I got to admit, as my Chicago friends used to call me, Sassy Pants Lisa, there was no Sassy Pants Lisa anymore. I was humbled. God allowed it. Why? Well, He wanted to change me so that I became less self-reliant. I would lose my pride so that daily I had no choice but to trust Him. And for that, I'm grateful because through it, God humbled me, drew me closer to Him, and as a result, made me more sympathetic to others. And we know in all things, God works for the glory of those who love Him and have been called according to His purpose. Romans 8:28. I literally could fill up a book of the journey of God and all the trials, tribulations, and strange coincidences that can only be explained as God. Psalm 50:15 says, "Call upon me in the day of trouble, so I can rescue you and you can give me glory." I am giving Him glory today as I see He had great plans for me and both my children. My son, Jake, graduated from Purdue as an engineer. And ironically, I don't know how this all got orchestrated. Again, only God. He is now working with COVID, trying to get medical supplies to ERs across the country. And my daughter, Tara, she's in New York finishing her degree at Pace University. My story is not what I've gone through, but who has been with me every step of the way. I have learned that every success, every good decision comes from God. I learned we have a personal Jesus who loves us, He sees us, He listens to us, and He will, and I know this for certain, guide us if we are only willing to listen to Him. And finally, I really have learned the secret of being content in every situation. I can do everything through Christ who gives us strength. Happy Easter.
Awesome. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mike. My name is Darren Iacono, and I've been attending Santa Barbara Community Church for about a year and a half, having moved to Santa Barbara just over 3 years ago. Currently, I hang out with 12 and 14-year-olds about 9 months out of the year over at Santa Barbara Junior High. I'm the art teacher there. It's a really great time. And while there, I actually met my wife, this awesome math teacher who worked just down the hall. She's sitting over here. I was born and raised in San Pedro in a large Italian family. My mom and dad are here today. They're over there too. They are awesome, John and Annette. There's always been a lot of love, a lot of laughter, a lot of food. Family gatherings, it also tends to get pretty loud, but that just adds to all the fun. It's a great time when we are Italian. My mom and dad raised me well, and I grew up in the Catholic Church. I did my first communion. I went through confirmation classes, but I never really understood who Jesus was or who God the Father and God the Holy Spirit were. I believed God to be real, but I never knew him. I never knew him relationally. It was all a bit murky, and I didn't have this real clear picture. He changed all that, though, when I went to Cal Lutheran University, which is just down the way in Thousand Oaks. I grew up playing all kinds of sports. My mom and dad were amazing at exposing my brother to all different kinds of activities, competitions, team sports, taking us everywhere. I ended up really gravitating towards baseball, and I dreamed of actually becoming a professional baseball player. I played in middle school, high school, club teams, and junior college, and then I went to Cal Lutheran University to actually play baseball there. But during the first couple of months while I was there, I sustained a back injury. I had a stress fracture in between my L5 and S1 vertebrae. So I was quickly done for the year in a back brace, and I wasn't playing. So that was the end of that. One night while I was there, I was laying on the floor thinking to myself, and I vividly remember just laying there thinking, what am I doing with my life? In a moment, I realized my identity was actually wrapped up in baseball. And after one MRI scan and a couple of doctor visits, it was taken away. My actual first thought was, well, if I can't play, here in the States because I'm injured, I probably won't be as good. Maybe I can go play over in Italy in the Italian leagues. Like, I was really thinking that. And so my scope was pretty narrow, and I didn't quite see that until that moment. Because I was actually going to be an environmental science major, because my first thought was, well, I'm going to Cal Lutheran to play baseball. And the environmental science major thing happened because it was like, well, I like to be outside, so let's just do that. I actually allowed baseball, and little did I realize, I allowed it to become the director of my life, building things on that and building my identity in that. So as I laid there on the floor in my room, feeling pretty lost, it's just me, and my family's not around, I'm away at school. I wasn't really sure what I'm doing with my life. I did what most people did when they get desperate. I prayed. And I asked God, if you let me play one more year of baseball, then I will be yours. And in that moment, that's all I wanted. I wanted to play one more year because I came to play one more year, and that was the goal. And it was great. Fast forward a year, and that's exactly what God orchestrated. After healing and going through physical therapy, I played the following year. I sustained another shoulder injury, though. This time, I ended up having surgery over the summer, and I tried to actually come back and play, but the coach passed and said, sorry, can't use you, and that was that. But a friend of mine, Chris Myers, who I met on the team, had invited me to church, and thinking about the prayer that I prayed, I said, well, I'll be yours. I was like, okay. So I accepted his invitation, and I went to church with him. I wasn't really knowing what I was doing. I went with anticipation, feeling nervousness. I didn't know what I was in store for. But I knew I was searching for something, and I didn't really know what it was. I've never forgotten the church service that I went to. The pastor was preaching through 1 Peter chapter 2, and I remembered that things started just making sense. It was like I could visually see the scripture, the words. And being an art teacher, I'm really, I guess lucid, for lack of a better term. And so it's like I could see the words almost. And then I remember turning to Chris after the service and asking him, okay, So who is Jesus? Chris then explained Jesus is God, the Son of God, essentially God in the human form, in human flesh. He walked this earth, he spoke to people, he taught to people, then he died for us, his creation, on a cross. Now, I didn't get all of that. It didn't all sink in that moment, but I finally understood that Jesus was God and that I could know him and have this relationship with him. He actually wanted a relationship with me, and he actually wants a relationship with everybody here, with every single person. And it was awesome. I don't really have a moment where everything clicked and I said, now I'm going to follow Jesus, and then committed my life to him. I don't really have that moment. My wife asked me, and I couldn't really come up with one. It just became this journey of understanding who he is, how he died for me, how he loved me, how he rose from the dead so that I could be free from fear, worry, and anxiety, free to know God, to know the creator of the universe, the creator of me, the creator of literally everything. I mean, it's amazing when you just think about that scope. It's all of it. I used to be filled with such worry being a baseball player. I'm around a lot of other baseball players, and superstitions run pretty high if you know baseball. And it carried over into like every part of my life. I'd walk through a parking lot and I wouldn't step on lines because I thought it was bad luck. Like, no joke. And it just carried over. And that's why I had all these different nuances going, but you couldn't see it just looking from the outside. That was always in my head. So I believe my understanding grew over time as I continued to search for answers. I was constantly reading my Bible and asking questions. I slowly began to surrender my life because what I'm reading became what I wanted the foundation of my life to be. Through my experience in losing baseball, losing what I was building my life upon, I realized that I wanted direction. I wanted a foundation. I wanted something to always go to, somebody who I could ask and know, okay, like this is happening because it's supposed to happen. There's a reason behind this. Maybe I can't see it here. In meeting Jesus, I recognized that he was all of that. He was the one I could go to. I wanted him to be the director of my life. Not baseball, not surfing, not anyone, not any philosophy, any famous person, celebrity, or famous quotation. He changed my identity. I now identified with him, and I wanted that to be the director. I wanted him to be everything. Just the other day, I actually looked at Miranda, and I said to her, I could never have imagined the life that I had now. The way that I love you, where we are, the way that I love my mom and dad, the way that I love my brother, the way that I love my in-laws, just everything. I just stopped and I was thinking about it, and it just blew my mind. And it's amazing. I'm so thankful. It's because of Jesus. He's the director. He's my identity. Because to live is Christ. And that's where I'm at. Thank you guys for listening. You guys are awesome. Awesome audience. Thank you.